Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us here today at the Sunshine Cathedral via the website. And we want to welcome you to our worship services whenever you're in the Fort Lauderdale area. If you are in the area, we invite you to worship with us on Sunday mornings at 9 and 10:30 a.m. We're located at 1480 Southwest 9th Avenue. And for those who watch us weekly on the internet, we invite you to check our website often for other listings and programming that we might have that may be of interest to you. And for now, I invite you to come in and worship with us here at the Sunshine Cathedral.
Mahatma Gandhi exhorted, "When I despair, I remember that all through history, the way of truth and love has always won. There have been tyrants and murderers, and for a time they can seem invincible, but in the end, they always fall. Think of it, always. In these human words, God's voice is heard."
Thanks be to God.
Please rise as you're able for our next reading.
The good news is recorded in the fourth gospel. Pilate entered the headquarters again, summoned Jesus, and asked him, "Are you the king of the Jewish people?" Jesus answered, "Do you ask this on your own, or did others tell you about me?" Pilate replied, "I am not Jewish, am I? Your own nation and the chief priests have handed you over to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not from this world. If my kingdom were from this world, my followers would be fighting to keep me from being handed over. But as it is, my kingdom is not from here." Pilate said, "So you're a king?" Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. For this I was born, and for this I came into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone who belongs to the truth listens to my voice." Pilate asked him, "What is truth?" In these human words, God's voice is heard.
Thanks be to God.
Please join me in a spirit of prayer. We may not always know what is true, O God, but may we nevertheless always be seekers of truth. If we seek, we must eventually find. Amen.
Please join me in the spirit of prayer. Let us dwell together in peace, and let us not be instruments of our own or others' oppression. And now may God's word be spoken, may only God's word be heard. Amen. Well, my great Aunt Gladys was making breakfast one day. She did every day for my great Uncle Arthur. And he came in, and he had a bad look on his face. He was clearly miserable. He plopped down at the breakfast table and he said, "Gladys, I'm struggling. I'm just struggling. I just can't get it together." And so she rolled her eyes. She said, "Whatever. What's wrong? What's wrong now?" she said. And he said, "Well, I've been really flatulent lately. I mean," and she's like, "What else is new?" He's like, "No, seriously, like super flatulent. And the worst thing about it is they're all silent. I'm just constantly having these silent gas emissions, and they just sneak up on you, and you can't hear them. But they're more and more frequent. In fact, since I've been sitting here, I've had flatulence this whole time, 3 silent gas emissions. I don't know what I should do." And she said, "Well, first you should get your hearing checked." So the next day, she takes him to the doctor. And he goes in to see the doctor, and he explains to her that he has had just an increasing amount of flatulence and apparently some hearing loss. And so she gives him an examination and says, "You know what, Arthur, I'm going to need you to step out. I want to see Gladys. I want you to send your wife in for a minute." And he doesn't, "That sounds good, but okay," she's the doctor. So he goes out, and he says, "Okay, she wants to see you for a minute. I'll just wait out here in the waiting area." So my Aunt Gladys goes into the doctor's office, closes the door, and the doctor says, "I'm going to give it to you straight, Gladys. There's an issue. There's a problem, but there's also some good news. There's hope. The difficulty is Arthur's on the verge of a nervous collapse. It's just too much. He's just overwrought. He is just stretched too thin, and he's about to break. And so what I need you to do, because if you'll do this, there's hope for him. He can get through this. What I need you to do is humor him all the time. Flatter him all the time. Always speak in pleasant tones. Don't challenge him. Don't aggravate him at all. If you'll do this, he'll get through this. If not, he's about 2 weeks from being a goner. So she understands. She goes out, and she sees Arthur in the waiting area. He says, "Oh my God, what did she say?" And my class said, "She said you have 2 weeks to live." 2 weeks later, on my great uncle Arthur's deathbed, he calls for my great aunt Gladys. He wants to tell something before he crosses over the Jordan. And so he says, "Gladys, come here. He'll take my hand. I've got something I've got to tell you before I go." He's like, "All right, what?" And she takes his hand, and he says, "Gladys, I have squirreled away $300,000. I've just been saving it here and there, tucking it away, hiding it. You never knew about it. I've got $300,000. And she's like, "Oh, wow. He's going to leave me some money. That's okay. Maybe we've been happier than I realized. Yay." And he said, "But I worked so hard for it. Worked so hard to keep it from you. Worked so hard to save it. I want to take it with me. So I want you to promise that you will bury me with my $300,000. He said, "If you don't, I'll haunt you. I need you to promise so I can go in peace to know that you were burying my money with me." And with that, he breathed his last. And so she reached over, she kissed him on the forehead, and she whispered in his ear, "Don't worry, darling. I'm going to bury you with $300,000. In fact, I'm going to write you a personal check right now." You know, like in the gospel today. No, seriously, I just needed sometimes, I'm like, what can I do to just be ridiculous and silly today? Because I'm exhausted. I'm exhausted because for my whole life, I have been fighting for certain things. And we had made a lot of progress, and a lot of that progress is now being threatened. And so I'm exhausted. I'm a little anxious. And I know that I'm just going to have to keep on working and fighting the good fight. I'm going to have to keep on being a worker in the field of justice. I'm going to have to keep telling people who are constantly beat up, you are God's miracle and not God's mistake. I'm going to have to keep challenging systems of oppression. I'm going to have to keep saying that liberty and justice for all means all. And I'm exhausted. That should be so self-evident. That should be such an a priori realization that we don't even have to spend time on it. And yet, state legislatures are still trying to legislate against marriage equality. And still, some very well-known evangelical preachers are still demonizing and dehumanizing same-gender loving people, as well as others. There's this war against women's autonomy over their own bodies. There is this war against the poor. There is this war against same-gender loving people. There is this war against people who do not fit into gender binaries. There is this war against Muslims. There is this war against immigrants and refugees. There's a lot of war, and it's all against the various children of God, and so much of it is done in the name of religion, which makes my life hard, because I have to dress like this and say all of that is BS. So forgive me if sometimes we just have to take a break and be silly, because we have to recharge then for this uphill battle. We have to recharge for this uphill battle. And what I've noticed also a lot lately is that people trying to take power, trying to keep power, trying to keep others in the margin, they have developed a lot of talking points and a lot of arguments. And so they're trying to argue people into submission. They're trying to argue people into the margins. They're trying to argue people into places of submissiveness. They're trying to dominate with their various arguments, proving that there is something they can look up in a book or in a tradition or in a history that will say, this is the way it's always been and always should have been. And so if you have any other opinion or experience, you must be wrong. And that, of course, is an abuse of power. That is an abuse of the tradition. That is an abuse of dogma and doctrine. That is using religion like a weapon to bludgeon people. And because the truth is, what is truth? The truth is that if our religious or spiritual journeys do not lead us to a place of a peace that passes understanding and joy unspeakable, if it doesn't lead us to an experience of God as love, all-inclusive, unconditional, everlasting love, we have missed the mark. We are not going to argue ourselves into rightness. We cannot argue ourselves into rightness, but we can love ourselves into holiness. And so, Jesus spends his whole life touching untouchables, loving the unloved, lifting up the downtrodden, reaching out to the margins, and people loved him for it. He's developing a big fan base. People are loving him. He loves them so much, he's becoming part of them. They think about him. They're trying to follow his example. They're trying to listen to what he says, because what he says is that they are God's miracle and not God's mistake. What he says is that they all have sacred value. What he says is that there is not a spot where God's love cannot reach them and hold them, and that it will never let them go. And so he's eating with people, the religious types that he shouldn't be eating with. He is touching people that religious types said were untouchable. He is breaking all kinds of boundaries. He is crossing cultural and ethnic and geographic and religious boundaries, because when he sees a person, he sees a child of God, and he tells them so, and that changes their lives. And so they are being very faithful to him, very loyal to him, very fond of him. I was saying in the earlier service that I remember when Princess Diana, it was very clear to her that she was never going to be the queen consort of the United Kingdom. The marriage was over, the divorce was going to go through, she was never going to be queen. And when the interviewer asked her about that, do you want to be queen? Is there any way you could be queen? And she said, I want to be the queen of people's hearts. That's what Pilate doesn't understand. Jesus isn't trying to form a government. Jesus isn't trying to raise an army. Jesus isn't the pretender to some throne. No, Jesus is a prophet. Jesus is a preacher. Jesus is a healer. Jesus is a miracle worker. Jesus is someone who is letting people know that the power of love is already within them, and he's helping them touch that power and be transformed by it. And so they love him. They follow him. He is in their hearts. He reigns over their hearts, but not from a position of power or privilege. He's doing it from a sense of purpose, from a sense of peace, from a sense of connection. He's just ministering and witnessing to God's love. And those who hear that truth, they can't be argued out of it. They can't be beaten out of it. They can't be cheated out of it. Those who hear the message that you are God's miracle and not God's mistake, that God's love is all-inclusive and unconditional, and it will never let you go. Those who hear that voice, oh, they know. They know. And Pilate just dismisses it with a flip talking point. What is truth? What is truth? Well, Jesus has been showing them what the truth is the whole time. Jesus has been showing them that God is love, and love is to be expressed, and it is for all people. Jesus has been showing that the whole time. Jesus, when a woman is being stoned, and there's a scripture verse that says she should be stoned, Jesus walks in and says, religion isn't about condemning the people you have called to sin. And he saves her. He rescues her from their religious abuse. He also seems to know that if her sin is adultery, that is not a thing you do by yourself. Why is only one person being stoned? So there's a little hypocrisy, a little misogyny in the mix too, which are, one might say, sinful. And so he says, those who are without sin, cast the first stone. And since there's not a man in this circle, you're all hypocrites and sexists. So put your stones down. Jesus, when he sees a crowd full of hungry people, tells his disciples, give them something to eat. He doesn't blame the people for being hungry. He just wants them fed. When people are untouchable, he touches them. And when people have been discarded, he embraces them. He's been showing us what truth is. Truth is that God is love, and love leaves nobody out. So he doesn't have to argue with Pilate. He's been living the truth the whole time. And those who are changed by it, they've been trying to live it too. This is the bottom line, love. When Jesus is asked what the greatest commandments are, all the hundreds of commandments in Scripture, he says love. Love your neighbor, love God, just love. That's the truth. That's the truth of what God is. That is the truth of what we are to aspire to. That is what ministry is. So if you're tired like I am of all the arguments and all the fighting and all the proof texting and all the talking points and all to keep people in their place and in the margins and outside and to tell them how they're not good enough and how they shouldn't have the same rights as others and how they should be excluded from families and churches and working places, if you're tired of it, but you know you have to keep on fighting because we have to do what's right. We have to defend the defenseless. We have to give voice to the voiceless. We have to say that every single person without exception has sacred value. And as followers of Jesus, it is our job, even when there is risk involved, to affirm that truth. What is truth? The truth is God's love excludes nobody. And when people do exclude people in God's name, they are using God's name in vain. That's the truth. Forgive my lengthy intro. I'll get to the sermon now. God is love. And those who experience God as love discover hope and peace and joy. That's the truth. And it's so unnerving that the powers that be tried to silence that truth by killing Jesus. And they try to silence it still with character assassination and intimidation and vilification and isolation, but they will fail. Tyranny seems to prosper for a time, Gandhi tells us, but eventually it must fail. That's what apocalyptic literature is all about the battle between what is right and what is wrong, and what is right prevails. Justice ultimately prevails. Love ultimately wins. Tyranny seems to prosper for a time, but it must fail. And theologies that paint God as a tyrant, they too must fail. And that is the liberating, life-giving truth that Pilate can't grasp today. But you and I can, and we must share it. Love is a healing balm. Love is God's signature. Love is the truth. And this is the good news. Amen.
There is love that takes you and breaks you in pieces. There's love that fades like the 6 a.m.